We're doing Pythagorean Theorem. The first thing you know about Pythagorean Theorem is that it's only true for right triangles. It will only work for right triangles. It won't work on obtuse triangles or acute. The characteristics of a right triangle that you need to know to use Pythagorean Theorem are legs and the hypotenuse. The legs are connected to the right angle. They touch the right angle. We say they're adjacent to the right angle. And then the hypotenuse, we know it's the hypotenuse because it's the longest side. It will always be the longest side. It's also opposite of the right angle. It does not touch the right angle. It will not touch the right angle. Make sure you know those. It's important. To use Pythagorean Theorem correctly, you have to know what are the legs and what's the hypotenuse. Alright, you need to write this down. Alright, this is Pythagorean Theorem. It's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. This is why you had to know what are the legs and what are the hypotenuses of the right triangle. Because the legs are a and b. And c is always the hypotenuse. We use Pythagorean Theorem to figure out the lengths of a right triangle. If you know two of the lengths, usually the legs, you can find out how long the hypotenuse is. Sometimes you can't just measure. You don't have a measuring stick or or measuring tape. So what you have to do is you have to use Pythagorean Theorem. Pythagoras came up with this a long time ago. He found that if you square A and add it to the square of B, you get the square of C. And then you can find out what C is. So we can find the lengths of a right triangle off of this. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. A and B, it doesn't really matter. This could be B and this could be A. The legs are interchangeable. The only thing that's not is C. C is the longest side. It has to be by itself. You have to add these, and this has to be by itself. Any questions about Pythagorean Theorem?
When you get C,
write this down. So this is mainly what your homework's going to look like. It's going to say find the length of the hypotenuse. And they're either going to give you a triangle or just going to tell you the sides of that triangle. This one they say one of the legs is 8, one of the legs is 15, and you got to figure out what C is. So always go off of this. A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared. And plug in what we know. Now I told you the legs don't matter. So it doesn't matter if 8 is A or 15 is A. It really doesn't matter. So we have 8 squared plus 15 squared, and we know that equals to C squared. 8 squared is 64. 15 squared is 225. So we know when we add 64 and 225, you get 289. To get C, I need to know what C is. Not C squared, it's 289. I need to know what C is. So we square root both sides. Now usually you would get plus or minus. Whenever we did square roots before for a variable, you got plus or minus. But is there any way this could be a negative number? No, distance can't be negative. Right? Distance can't be negative. So we just know it's going to be the positive number. The square root of 289 is 17. So C is 17 millimeters. That's how long the hypotenuse of this triangle is. Alright, this is another type of question. It's going to say find a missing length. So you have 40 for one of the lengths, 25, and X for the other. If you go with A squared plus B squared is equal to C squared and plug in what you know, 25 would be A squared. Someone raise your hand and tell me what B squared would be. Gowdy. He says 40, but would it be 40 squared? No. 40 is hypotenuse. Is it one of the legs? No. Remember, the hypotenuse is always opposite the right angle. So your B cannot be 40. It needs to be X squared. Sorry to use you to sacrifice Gowdy, but I asked that because someone always wants to put 40. And so I have to make sure you understand that just because they give you two numbers, X is not always going to be C. Sometimes it's A, sometimes it's B. They do that on purpose. Make sure you're paying attention so you don't make that mistake on your homework today. And then 40 squared would be C. C squared. 25 squared is 625. 40 squared is 1600. I need x squared by itself, which we've done this 1,000 times. We know how to do this. You look at what's being done to x squared and do the opposite of it. We're adding 625 to it, so we subtract 625 from it. So x squared is equal to 975. Which we square root that to get x by itself. The square root of 975 is 31.2. It's actually more than that, but you're supposed to round to the nearest tenth. So x is 31.2 feet. You can check your answer in a couple different ways. You want to make sure that the legs are not longer than the hypotenuse. If they are, you've done something wrong. 31.2 is smaller than 40, so that must be right. And then you can plug in, do 31.2 squared plus 25 squared and see if you get 1600, which you do. All right? Any questions? This is the converse of Pythagorean Theorem, which means if c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared, then triangle is a right triangle. What they'll do is they'll give you three numbers, three sides of a triangle, and they'll say, is this a right triangle? Without plugging it, without trying to draw a triangle and figuring it out, all you have to do is plug it into Pythagorean Theorem and see if a squared plus b squared equals c squared. If it does, then it's a right triangle. So let's do that with 6, 8, and 10. 6 squared plus 8 squared, and we're going to see if it's equal to 10 squared. 36 is what 6 squared is. Then we do 64, because that's 8 squared. And see if it's equal to 100, which what is 36 plus 64? It's 100. 100 equals 100, so yes, this is a right triangle. Let's do 4, 5, and 6. So you do 4 squared plus 5 squared and see if it's equal to 6 squared. 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25, and 6 squared is 36. 16 plus 25, what does that equal? 41. Does 41 equal 36? No. So is this a right triangle? No. It's only a right triangle if it's a true statement. Any questions on how to do that?
Nope.
It's pretty simple. You just plug in a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Here's your assignment.